Hey everyone out there. So today we're going to go through the installation of our ACS3 coil conversion kit for the Shox Pike. So with this installation, we're going to take into consideration that you have one of our do-it-yourself service kit, which comes complete with fork seals, fluids, and the tools necessary to do a lower leg service. And then obviously our full ACS3 conversion kit. If you're just installing the coil kit, then obviously you can skip the lower leg service aspect of the video. Okay, so the tools necessary for this install, we're using a 24 millimeter spanner wrench, 24 millimeter push suspension socket, a 32 millimeter push suspension socket. We have a 3/8 ratchet, a 10 millimeter socket, an 18 millimeter deep socket, torque wrench. We've got a dental pick, a 5 millimeter hex key, a 2.5 millimeter hex key, a pair of snap ring pliers, just a flat blade screwdriver, and we've got a tire lever for doing the fork seal removal. And then we've just got this metal rod for pushing rags into the lower legs for cleaning, and then just a small tap hammer. Okay, before we get started, we always want to make sure we're using safety glasses. I'm going to install those real quick. The first thing we need to do with installing this kit is to completely remove all the air pressure. So we're going to remove the air cap, set that aside, and just release all the air pressure. Once all the air pressure is released, I'm going to use my 3/8 ratchet, my 24 millimeter suspension socket, to remove the air top cap. Set that aside. So with the Shox front forks, there's two different thread pitches that are used on the Pike. So we have the 2018 Shox Pike and the pre-2018 Boost Pike use one thread pitch, and then the non-Boost pre-2018 Shox uses a different thread pitch. The long and short of it is, before going through your ACS3 installation, what you should do is remove the air top cap. You're going to take your ACS unit and simply thread it into the top of the fork to confirm that you have the correct thread pitch. This should go in with your fingers quite easily and then start to get some resistance. So I just confirmed that this is the correct thread pitch, so now we can move forward on the install. Our air bump stops are marked. That says Shox MK1 or Shox MK2. The MK2 is for the Boost forks and the 2018 fork. The MK1 is for non-Boost forks and pre-2018. You can look at the ACS support tab on our website for more information on that. Okay, so we've removed the air top cap, completely depressurized the fork. Now using a 2.5 millimeter Allen key, we're going to loosen up the set screw on the rebound adjuster so that we can remove it, set it aside. We'll be reusing that. Taking a 5 millimeter Allen key, we're going to loosen up both of the lower foot bolts, 2 or 3 revolutions, and then using a tap hammer, we're just going to tap on those foot bolts to break them loose. Okay. Once those are loose, or once we've freed the rods from the lower leg, we can remove the bolts completely, set those aside. The foot bolt on the damper leg, we are going to reuse. The foot bolt on the spring side, we will not be using again. Now we can just simply slide the lowers off. And let the oil drain out of those. Okay, so next we need to remove the lower retaining ring and the lower air plunger assembly. The Shox fork uses a little safety key system to keep that retaining ring in place. So the plastic cap has a little bit of preload, so I use a flat blade screwdriver to kind of push down on the plastic cap while I move the retaining ring. It's a little tricky. Might take you a few tries, myself included. So I just use the screwdriver to push down some preload. That allowed me to get the snap ring squeezed and out of the way. So we're going to remove that snap ring. We will not be reusing that. Now we can remove the lower plunger. Sometimes it's easier to stick the foot bolt back in there just to have something to yank on. So you'll hear a little bit of air pop. That's normal. We're going to pull this lower plunger out and set it aside. And again, we will not be reusing that. At this point, we're going to use some Simple Green and some cleaner. We use Maxima Suspension Clean. And we're just going to take some time to just clean up the tubes inside and out really well before we move on. Okay, so once you've got the lower lay or the upper tubes all prepped and ready to go, in your kit, inside the owner's manual pack, there's a retaining ring and travel indicator O-ring that we're going to need to use. So just take those out of the package. They are labeled. So we're going to need that retaining ring, and we've also provided you with a new travel indicator O-ring. So first we're going to just take the travel indicator O-ring and slide it down onto that tube. We're going to take our lower plunger assembly out of the box. I'm going to take a little bit of push SOS lube, apply a light film to the inside of the tube and a light film to the spring bearing at the top of the plunger. The lower plunger comes assembled. We're going to need to remove the foot nut and the new crush washer that comes in the kit. And then we're also going to want to unthread the top out stop nut from what we call the top out stop. Now we'll insert the plunger assembly into the tube. You're going to use the retaining ring that came in the ACS3 kit. And okay, we always take a dental pick, and if the retaining ring is in the gland properly, you should be able to spin this thing and spin it around quite freely. That lets you know it's in there nice and square. At this point, you need to just apply a light film of grease on the threads of the top out stop nut. And pulling up on the plunger will allow you to start the threads. You're going to need your 24mm spanner and 18mm deep socket. We're going to torque this to 80 inch-pounds. You will be tightening this by turning the torque wrench counterclockwise. So once that's tightened down, the lower plunger assembly is correctly in place. This should slide up and down freely. Now we need to install the fork spring that came in your kit. Simply drop that down into place. After your spring is installed, inside your kit will be a preload cap. Please note that the preload caps are different sizes for the different color springs. So the correct preload cap for your spring color is in your kit. You'll put the preload cap in. So I'm just going to apply a light film of SOS lube to the O-ring on the air bump stop housing and install that. Start the threads by hand, and then using my 32mm push suspension socket, I'm going to tighten that down. So once we've got the cap snug down, we're going to do a final torque of 250 inch-pounds on that top cap. Okay, so now our upper assembly is prepped and ready to go. So we're going to just do the lower leg service as well. So for this, we're just going to use a tire lever to pry out the stock seals. So we're going to remove the foam rings and the fork seals. And now we're going to use some Simple Green or some kind of mild cleaner, isopropyl alcohol, to really clean the insides of the lower legs out. Once you've got your lower legs good and clean, we're going to take our fork seals out of our package, along with the foam rings. Got our bottle of plush fluid. Generally, I just use the cap of the plush fluid bottle, fill it up, and push the foam rings in to soak up some fluid. While those are soaking, take my 35mm seal driver, put a little bit of SOS lube on the inside of the fork seal, and install it onto the driver. We recommend that you do not put any kind of grease on the outside of the fork seal or on the inside of the lower leg. We want the seal to be pressed in dry. So we're just going to take our driver with our fork seal and smack that in place. And repeat that on the other side. Light film on the inside of the fork seal of the SOS lube. Slide it down onto the driver. Install the driver into the bushing. Give a little tap until the seals go completely flush. Our fork seals have a flanged design, whereas the stock fork seals are flangeless. So they will look a little bit different. The flanged design allows us to seat the fork seal perfectly perpendicular with the tubes. Next, we're going to take our foam rings out that are saturated with the plush fluid. Just stretch them a little bit, and I'm going to stick them down inside the gland underneath the fork seal. And now we're ready to install those back onto the lower leg, or excuse me, the upper assembly. It makes it easier if the damper rod is fully extended as well. Simply align the lower legs onto the upper tubes, wiggle them a little bit, and they should slide up and down nice and free once you have them engaged. So now that we've got the lowers aligned onto the upper tubes, before we button up the foot nut and foot bolt, we need to put 20 cc's of Maxima plush fluid in each side. So I'm just going to take my syringe, and before the lower rods are pushed down, I'm just going to squirt in 20 cc's of plush fluid into each leg. Now we can drop the fork down to install the foot bolt and foot nut. Okay, once we have the lower legs fully engaged, we're going to take the stock foot bolt on the stock damper side foot bolt, and reinstall it. Tighten that down all the way. Reinstall the rebound adjuster using a 2.5mm Allen key to tighten the set screw down. We're going to take the crush washer and the blue foot nut that came in our ACS3 kit. We're going to install the crush washer, and then we're going to install the foot nut. Using a torque wrench, we're going to tighten the ACS3 foot nut down to 70 inch-pounds. Last but not least, we're going to take, again, our simple green or isopropyl alcohol and fully clean the fork. The last step, probably the most important step because it makes the performance significantly better, is by adding the decal. I read that on the internet. So now, finished completely cleaning the fork, and it's ready to ride. Thanks.